Same thing, Tasa.
Yeah, well this is the whole group is a Tasa group, right?
Ah, okay.
So this one is a bass drum. That one is called a jal, some people call it cymbals.
That's like Janj.
Yeah. And this one is...
This is like a
Tasa
dole
drum.
actually.
Yeah. In India it's something like this.
Yeah.
And this one is the I think in India they call it Tasha or something like that.
That's good. Sweet.
Yeah, they can try.
Yeah, sure.
They can try now, man. I tell you, stick with them, man. They can try now, man.
So what's the basic beat?
Simply
Pan drum.
Rani.
Is there bowl like there is on tabla, like dhage nati naka dhimna or something?
Tasa is more like a rhythm now. Yeah. There is good beats.
Okay, show me a
This one is
simple
called
beat.
steel pan.
Am I holding it wrong? How do you hold it? Oh, you've got it in like this, right?
Yeah, that's just basic cool in me and I already
That I can do.
Radhe Radhe, Sitaram everyone. This evening's discourse will be presented by Swami Nikhilanand ji. Swami Nikhilanand ji is a disciple of Jagat Guru Sri Kripaluji Maharaj. Jagat Guru Sri Kripaluji Maharaj is the fifth original Jagat Guru or world teacher of this age, Kali Yuga. Swami Nikhilanand ji has been preaching the philosophy of divine love in various parts of the United States. Swamiji conducts satsangs, lecture series, spiritual retreats, and also counsels seeking souls on the path to God realization. Swamiji is a spiritual teacher at Radha Madhav Dham in Austin, Texas, and also at Radha Govind Dham in New York. This is Swamiji's first visit to Trinidad, and we are very fortunate to have Swamiji give discourses on the Bhagavatam for the next few days. At this point, we'd like to humbly request Swamiji to begin this evening's program. Jai Shri Radhe.
Radhe Radhe and Sitaram to everyone. Prathamam Sadgurum Vande Shri Krishnan Tadanantaram Guru Papatmanam Tratam Shri Krishnas Tvamalatmanam Kasturi Tilakam Lalat Patale Vakshasthale Kaustubham Nasagre Varmauktikam Karatale Venu Kare Kankanam Sarvange Harichandanam Sulalitam Kanthe Chamuktavali Gopastri Pariveshtito Vijayate Gopal Chudamani Namah Kamalnabhaya Namah Kamalmaline Namah Kamalpadaya नमस्ते कमले क्षण यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तग्मंह देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये. Dear devotees, we'll continue with a few minutes of Nam Sankirtan. So let's all wholeheartedly chant the names of Radhe Govinda. Raj, I think you could turn this up a little. You can all repeat after me. Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe
Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Govinda 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 Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda
Radhe Radhe
राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा Shri Lal Ki. Radhe Radhe to all the devotees. It's very nice to be visiting Trinidad after meeting so many Trinidadian devotees in New York in the last 12 years that I've been doing prachar for Jagat Guru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj. I feel like I know Trinidad already, so it felt very much like home when I came here, and in fact it reminded me very much of India, which made me feel even more at home. The topic for tonight and the next 3 days is the Bhagavatam. So to start with, I'll share a little bit of practical philosophy of the Bhagavatam with you, and we'll put that into practice by doing a little bit of meditation and one more kirtan, and after that I'll get into some of the theory of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is a conversation between a teacher and his disciple, Shukdev ji Paramahans. The Bhakta means the teller of the Bhagavatam, the teacher. And King Parikshit, his student, his disciple, the one asking the questions. Parikshit was what we would call a Janmajat Mahapurush. He got the divine vision of Shri Krishna in the womb. Shri Krishna came to save him from the Brahmastra that Ashwatthama had sent, trying to kill him after the Mahabharata war. So Shri Krishna appeared in the womb and saved him from the Brahmastra. So he got the divine vision of Shri Krishna before he was even born. In fact, when he was born, he came out looking around, very much aware, not like a normal baby. This is Parikshit, I'm saying. He was born from his mother Uttara. And he started looking around in all the faces of the people. So they couldn't understand, what is he doing? What is he looking for? He was looking for Shri Krishna. He wanted to see, where's that beautiful blue complexion boy I saw when I was in the womb? I don't know who all of you are. I want to see him again. So he's the Shrota. He's the listener of the Bhagavatam. Very highly qualified. Imagine if the one asking the questions is that highly qualified, what would be the qualification of the one who's giving the answers? Shukadev ji Paramahans. I'll give you a little bit of insight into that tonight. But in the beginning, Parikshit came to Shukadev ji and asked him a question, because Parikshit had just found out that he was going to die after 7 days. He was going to get bit by a poisonous snake and die. So he knew, I have 7 days to live. He was still the king at that time. He left everything, gave it to his son. You're the king now. And he went to the bank of Ganga. And there, in those days, on the banks of Ganga, there were many divine saints. Seeing Parikshit there, many of them gathered. And Shukadev ji came, and he was respected by even those other great saints who were there. So they all asked him, especially Parikshit, asked him to take a seat, prepared a proper asan for him, and then asked him this question: what should a person who is about to die do? How should they make use of their time? And there was a second part to the question. He wanted to know, what about a regular person who has no idea when they're going to die? They could live another 80 years or they could die in the next minute. They don't know. So that regular person as well, tell me, how should they spend their time? Shukadev ji answered, telling about bhakti, devotion. Although in the Bhagavatam, there are in other places many kinds of devotion, many different ways to do devotion described. But here, in answer to King Parikshit's question, he distills it down to just 3 ways of doing bhakti. Tasmat sarvatmana rajan hari sarvat tatra sarvada shrotavyah kirtitavyascha smartavyo bhagavan nrinam. He told the king, just do 3 things. That goes for you in your case, who knows he's going to die in 7 days, and for everyone else. Just do 3 things. Shravana bhakti, kirtana bhakti, and smarana bhakti. Shravana means listening. So you are all doing Shravana bhakti right now. Parikshit was doing Shravana bhakti when he was listening to Shukdev ji telling him the Bhagavatam. It means either listening to the philosophy. Philosophy means like the technical things you need to know. Who am I? What is a soul? Who is God? How can I meet God? That's also Shravarna, if you're listening to the philosophy. Or the other type of Shravarna you can do is Leela Shravarna. If someone is doing Katha of Shri Krishna's Leelas, Shri Ram's Leelas, that's another type of Shravarna Bhakti. You're taking God into your heart by hearing his Leelas. The second type of bhakti he described as Kirtan Bhakti, which we were all just doing. We know that Kirtan is so great. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ji has said that in the age of Kali, there's only one way to reach God, through his name. Even Tulsidas ji says, Kali Yuga Keval Hari Gun Gaha Gavat Nar Pavat Bhavatha. In Kali Yuga, there's only one way to cross this ocean of cosmic existence that's on the support of Ram's name, Hari's name. So Kirtan is great. But the third one is actually the most important. Smarana Bhakti. Smarana means when you remember someone in your heart. That's called smaran. In English, we would say thinking deeply about someone, remembering them. We do that with things and people that are important to us. Maybe you just bought a new house. And when you move into a new house, you start fixing up everything. Just so. Oh, I want the walls to look like this and the trim to look like that. I want the door to be like this. And I want my kitchen counters like that and the cabinets like that and the faucet should be just like that and this room should be decorated like this. The couch should match the wallpaper and everything. So even when you're not in the house, what are you doing? You're doing smaran of your house. Oh yeah, when I go back, I want to do this thing, I want to do that thing. Your mind is always in your house. Or maybe you bought a new car. Your mind might be in your new car. Or it could be in living beings. If you have a pet, your mind could be in your pet. Or, of course, the people that we love and are attached to. We very naturally do smaran of people and things that are important to us. Doing smaran of God is the most important way of doing bhakti. He should be important to us also. Just like we do smaran of our new car and our new house and our best friend and our children. God should be that important to us, that we would do smaran of him. He should have a place in our heart. What is the importance of smaran? Why is it so great? Well, think about this. If we are doing Shravan, means the words are going in our ears, but you're thinking about how to decorate your new house, even when you're sitting here listening to my speech. Are you really doing bhakti? No. In that case, you're doing bhakti of your new house. My words are going in your ears, but your mind is somewhere else. So God actually gives us the result of our karma based on where our mind is. So you won't be rewarded for physically sitting in the mandir tonight. Only to the extent God enters your heart a little bit more, that's the reward you get for coming to the mandir. So how does that happen? Your mind has to be engaged. Not only Shravan, but also Smaran. They go together. Same thing with Kirtan. If we're doing Kirtan loudly, nice beautiful tune, tabla and dholak playing in time, and the mind is thinking about, I don't know, what's for dinner after the satsang. The mind could be anywhere else. But if your mind is not in the one whose names we're chanting, then what will you get the benefit of? You'll get the benefit of what you're thinking of, for better or worse. Whatever you're thinking of, God is noting that. Okay, right now he's thinking, how many dal puri am I going to eat after satsang finishes? Did anyone make kheer tonight? God is noting those thoughts. It doesn't matter if we say Ram, Ram, Shyam, Shyam millions of times from our mouth if our mind is not taking his name. So that means Smaran has to be there along with Kirtan as well. Kirtan without Smaran, it's like a body without a soul. The body is there, but when the soul is gone, what's the value of the body? The body needs life in it. The soul has to be there. So the soul of devotion is Smaran. Your mind should be in God. That's it. If your mind is in God, do any kind of bhakti. Make up your own kind of bhakti. Let me tell you one story of Guruji, Shri Kripaluji Maharaj, when he was very young. He was 16 years of age. Even in those days, he was very much absorbed in the bliss of Radha Krishna. You know, like if you feel very happy about something, you forget about everything else. Saints are like that. In the bliss of God, they forget about everything else. And it's only with great effort that they bring themselves back to this world so that they can talk to us or be amongst us. So in those days, Shri Kripaluji Maharaj, most of the time or all of the time, was staying in this elevated state of being absorbed in the divine bliss. And he was wandering in the jungles of Madhya Pradesh. In his travels, he came upon a hut and a very old devotee, a very old bhakt of Shri Krishna, who was sitting outside of his hut. And Shri Maharajji was approaching from a distance, and he had observed this Babaji, that he was sitting on the path outside of his hut, and he was looking to, his hut was at his back, and he was looking to the path that was coming out of the jungle towards him. Much like Shabari would sit every day and wait for Bhagwan Ram to come, this old elderly devotee was sitting and waiting for Shri Krishna to come to him. And he had such an excitement. See, when you practice bhakti correctly, your heart purifies. And the more it purifies, the closer you're getting to actually meeting God. And the more the longing to meet God intensifies. So this bhakt was so excited. He just felt in his heart that today is the day. Shri Krishna is going to come to me. But look at how was he doing bhakti. He had himself a broken piece of comb and a shattered piece of mirror. And he was holding that little piece of mirror, trying to look at himself, and that broken piece of comb, and he was trying to comb out his beard and his hair, both of which were entangled. But as he was doing it, he is also feeling that excitement that Shri Krishna could be coming any time. And in that excitement, even though, you see, I would describe the state of a God-realized saint, even though he's not God-realized, but in that elevated state, even a devotee who's not God-realized can become so engrossed that they also forget the world. So this devotee was falling unconscious in that ecstasy, that intense longing of waiting for Shri Krishna. We call viraha. So he would be combing his beard or his hair, and then he'd say, Ha Krishna, and he'd fall over unconscious. And the comb would fall one side, the mirror would fall one side. Then he would pick it up after he regained consciousness, sit up, pick up his comb, pick up his mirror, and again try to comb his hair. And again, Ha Sham Sundar, and he would fall unconscious. So Shri Kripaluji Maharaj is observing this from a distance, and he came closer, and when that Babaji regained consciousness, he politely requested him to explain that, Babaji, what are you doing? You're sitting here with the comb and the mirror and you keep saying, Ha Priyatam, Ha Krishna. What are you doing? And that elderly devotee, he said, I am Shri Krishna's bhakt. He actually saw himself in the form of a gopi. Souls have no gender, so you can be Mother Yashoda if you want, even if you're born as a man in this life. Ladies, you can be Gwal Bals if you want. Anyone can be a gopi. So he said, I am Shri Krishna's gopi, and he's going to be coming to me any time now. So I want to look nice when he comes, that he should be happy to see me. In what scripture is that kind of bhakti described? It's not described anywhere that you should sit with a comb and a mirror and do bhakti. We'll call that Kangha bhakti, Hindi word for comb. Shravan bhakti, Kirtan bhakti, Smaran bhakti, and Kangha bhakti. It's not written anywhere. But it doesn't matter because he's doing Smaran. His mind was totally engrossed in thinking of Shri Krishna. So make up a new way of doing bhakti. There's no right or wrong in the physical style as long as your mind is in God. This is I'm not going to go far down this road today, but just taking this philosophy, you can just use that to be very accepting of not only all the different practices and forms of worship within Hinduism, but even in all the other religions of the world. Everybody's worshiping God in a different way with different physical formalities and rituals that they adopt. But where's the mind? That's the only important thing. It doesn't matter if that person worships God differently than I worship God. All that God is looking at is this person's mind in me? That's it. So smaran is the main thing. If we're thinking of God, we're doing bhakti correctly. But kirtan and shravan are big helping factors in this. The chanting of God's name increases the effectiveness of what you could call meditation. What I was calling smaran, when you're thinking of God, you can also call it meditation because you're focusing your mind on God. So the kirtan increases the effectiveness of that meditation. Or you could combine it with shravan, like listening to Shri Krishna's leelas, that helps you remember him. So it's a helping factor, but the smaran is main. So I want us, before I go further into the theory of the Bhagavatam, I want us to practice a little bit of smaran, because that is actually the core teaching of all the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma, including the Bhagavatam, that you just have to attach your mind to God. So let's practice this and get a little more experience of this, and then we'll talk some more theory. To do smaran, Jagadguru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj gave us a very practical way of engaging the mind in doing smaran. He called it Roop Dhyan. Roop means the form, and Dhyan means when you meditate, when you hold something in your mind. So doing Roop Dhyan is the easiest way to do smaran. In other words, meditating on the form of God is the easiest way of remembering God. Along with the form, You also have his personality, his virtues, his name, his leelas, his divine abode. But we call it Roop Dhyan. So what that means is, and I'll invite you all to close your eyes, and I'll lead you through a brief meditation, and then we'll add in some kirtan to enhance our meditation. I'll invite you to close your eyes. If for some reason you're uncomfortable with your eyes closed, you can also practice this with open eyes. Picture Shri Krishna in front of you. Real Shri Krishna has come to you. See his beautiful bluish complexion, his long, shiny black hair, slightly curly, falling in locks down to his shoulders. His golden crown, which is further beautified by the peacock feather, which is attached at an angle at the top of the crown. See his banamala, the flower garland that he wears, which is so fragrant. Because in Roop Dhyan, you can use all of your senses. So you can also smell the divine fragrance of his garland. Hear the sound of his flute, which he's holding in his hands. Hear the sound of his jingling anklets as he walks. See the silken saffron shawl around his shoulders, which flutters in the breeze. This is your Shri Krishna. He's yours. He's looking at you like you're mine. He's smiling. You feel very close to him, like there's no formality, no restriction. And he's looking at you like he's happy to see you. When we start the kirtan, I'd like you to continue to visualize Shri Krishna in this way, according to your own likings. You can change Shri Krishna's decorations, have different ornaments, dress him differently. You can look at different parts of his body. You can look at any one part, like just his eyes, just his charan, his lotus feet. You could visualize just his hand or his whole body, whatever comes naturally for you. You have a lot of freedom in this style of meditation. As long as you're thinking of him and you feel with faith in your heart that he really is here with you, that's all that is required. So I'll leave you to practice this Roop Dhyan in your own heart, in your own mind, as we now begin some kirtan to help us focus for longer. Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Govinda Radhe राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद 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 राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
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 राधे राधे गोविंद 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 गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे
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 राधे राधे गोविंद 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 गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे
राधे राधे गोविंद ki. Let's understand a little bit more about the Bhagavatam. Why is the Bhagavatam so important? Why would we focus exclusively on the Bhagavatam in this satsang over the next few days? The Bhagavatam had to come from somewhere, right? Before Shukadev ji told the Bhagavatam to King Parikshit, he must have heard it from somewhere. He did. He heard it from his father, Vedavyas ji. Many of you must have heard the name Vedavyas. Vedavyas is an avatar of Shri Krishna. One of his forms he takes. Interestingly, Vedavyas ji was on the earth at the same time Shri Krishna was 5,000 years ago. So he was there in both forms, as Shri Krishna and as Vedavyas. Vedavyas told the Bhagavatam to Shukadev ji, who happens to be his son. But Vedavyas ji got it from somewhere also. He heard it from Narad ji. Narad heard it from his father, Brahma. And Brahma got the Bhagavatam from Shri Krishna himself. Shri Krishna gave the knowledge of Bhagavatam to Brahma. That same knowledge he gave to his son Narad ji, Devarshi Narad. The same Bhagavatam Devarshi Narad gave to Vedavyas ji. Now Vedavyas ji, before he got this Bhagavatam from Narad ji, he had done a lot of work, important work. What did he do? He rewrote all of our scriptures of Sanatan Dharma. Start with Vedas. Ved is 1,00,000 mantra. One mantra is like the one I did at the end of my Vandana. Yo brahmanam vidadhati purvam yo vai vedanscha prahinoti tasmai tagvangha devamatma buddhi prakasham mumukshurvai sharanamaham prapadye. That's one mantra. 100,000 of those makes up Ved. Veda is divided into 4 parts: Rig Ved, Sam Ved, Yajur Ved, Atharva Ved. But put together, originally it's 100,000 mantras. He reproduced all of that because Ved is older than just 5,000 years. Ved is Anadi. It has no beginning. It's reproduced on the earth as required, but it's an eternal knowledge. So Vedavyas ji had rewritten all of that and taught it to his disciples. Add to that 6 darshan shastras: Nyay, Vaisheshik, Purva Mimamsa, Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta, Uttar Mimamsa, also known as Brahma Sutra. He himself is the author of the Brahma Sutra, but he also reproduced the other 5 darshan shastras that had been produced previous to him. So he rewrote all of that, made sure it's available in the world. On top of that, he wrote 17 Puranas. The Puranas in total is another 4,00,000 shloks. Ved is 100,000 mantras. The Puranas all taken together are 400,000 shloks. So he produced 17 Puranas. The 18th Purana is the Bhagavatam. He didn't produce that one at that time. So 17 Puranas. On top of that, Mahabharat, another 100,000 shloks. Included in Mahabharat is the most famous Gita, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 700 shloks, an excerpt of the Mahabharata. On top of that, Valmiki Ramayana, the original Ramayana in Sanskrit, he reproduced that, 25,000 shloks. And after having done all of that, what a gift to humankind. How much knowledge. Everything required for living your life in the world and for attaining God. Yet he was still feeling restless. You know, when you had a lot of things to do and you try to accomplish all of it, and you think you're done, but there's something nagging at you, like, I feel like there's one more thing I was supposed to do. What was that? And you can't remember? Vedavyasji was in that state. He's sitting on the bank of Saraswati River near his ashram, and he's just perplexed. Why do I have this feeling that something is left out? What's left? I produced Vedas, Puranas, Mahabharata, everything. Then Naradji comes to him. He says, Naish karmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam na shobhate jnanamalam niranjanam. You can just assume, whenever I'm quoting a shlok, if I don't tell you, assume it's from Bhagavatam, since all the quotations will be coming from Bhagavatam. Naradji tells him that Vedavyas, you produced all this knowledge, but you haven't given the ras of Krishna's leelas. The ras means the nectar, the sweetness. You described his leelas in Brahmavaivarta Puran and other Puranas. He's also described in several Upanishads in the Vedas. But you didn't put the bliss of Shri Krishna's leelas in that description. It's like a factual description. Write Shri Krishna's leelas with the bliss in there, so that when people read that or they hear those leelas, then Shri Krishna himself enters into their heart. That's what you didn't do. So Vedavyasji, you have to write Bhagavatam. In Bhagavatam, give the whole account of Shri Krishna's life, chronologically, and put the rest of those leelas in there. Because knowledge without love for God, shobhani deta, na shobhate, means it's not that great. Knowledge is a great thing, but knowledge that's bereft of love for God is not that great. So write the Bhagavatam. So that's how Naradji, who had gotten the knowledge of Bhagavatam from his father Brahma, who had gotten it from Shri Krishna, Naradji gave Bhagavat to Vedavyasji. Then Vedavyasji wrote the Bhagavatam. Now, having written it, when he's written such a great thing that actually has the bliss of Shri Krishna in it, imbued in it. See, when Shri Krishna was giving his final instructions before leaving the earth to Uddhavji, and this is all actually, this whole conversation between the two of them is in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. It's called the Uddhav Gita, because like Arjun was asking questions and Shri Krishna was giving answers in Bhagavad Gita, in 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, Uddhav is asking questions and Shri Krishna is giving answers. So at the end of this conversation, Shri Krishna says, now you go up in Himalaya and stay there in Badrika Ashram. He's giving Uddhav instructions. And I'm leaving. I'm going back to my divine abode. So Uddhav said, how can you leave? How will the devotees worship you? What about someone who wants to meet you? Shri Krishna says, don't worry. I'm putting myself in the Bhagavatam. So Bhagavat literally means the body of Shri Krishna, like it is Shri Krishna. So it's a very special thing. The bliss, see, each scripture is divine and it relates to a particular type of divine bliss. The bliss of the Gita is of one type. The bliss of the Bhagavatam is actually further enriched than the bliss of Gita. I'll get into that more later, or possibly tomorrow. But what I'm getting at is that not just anyone could be qualified to hear the Bhagavatam and retain the actual divine bliss imbued in the Bhagavatam. Because if you haven't done that, you haven't understood the Bhagavatam. You have to experience Bhagavatam. So who could be qualified to hear the Bhagavatam now that Veda Vyasji has produced it? He was in another dilemma. Now I've written it, who do I teach it to? How do I pass it down? None of my disciples in my ashram to whom I've taught Vedas, Vedant, other 17 Puranas, none of them are qualified. Who can I teach it to? So his son, Shukadevji, was a Paramahans. Paramahans means someone who is totally absorbed in the bliss of formless God. Nirakar Brahm. Ved says, Dvevav Brahmano Rupe Murtan Chaiva Murtan Cha. This means God has two aspects. One single God has two aspects. Murt and Amurt. You know, these are called murtis, right? These are murti. It means the form of God that we've represented. So God is Murt. He has a form, and simultaneously He's Amurt. Or we could say Nirakar, without form. The same God. He's the abode of contradictions, simultaneously existing opposites in the same place. How can you be both formless and have a form and exist omnipresently in both ways? Don't ask. He's God. He can do anything. So, in general, those who have attained God, they've either attained the personal form of God like Ram, Krishna, etc., or they've attained formless God. Two main categories of how someone can attain God. Shukadevji had attained formless God. Never mind attained, he was born like that. He's a descended saint. Listen to how he was born. Very different than how you and I are. His mother, her name was Pingla Devi. Yesterday I was with Shyam and we drove by a road called Pingla Street or Pingla Road. So it reminded me of Shukadevji and his mother Pingla Devi. So Pingla Devi was pregnant with Shukadevji, but he didn't come out even after years. He stayed inside her womb. She didn't have discomfort, but he wouldn't be born. So after 12 years, his father, Vedavyasji, says, "Oh son, what are you doing in there? Come out." Shukadevji says, "Father, you know, I've heard that as soon as a baby is born, that Maya takes over and he forgets all about God and just starts running after worldly pleasures. I don't want that to happen to me. I'm afraid of Maya, so I'm not coming out." Vedavyasji said, "Shukadeva, you don't have to worry. You're already beyond Maya. Just come out." So he emerged from his mother's body. Like a shadow, you could say. Like you and your shadow. He just came out. And he was right there in his physical form. Shukdev ji actually looks similar to Shri Krishna. If you've ever seen a picture or painting of him, he also has a bluish complexion. So he's a 12-year-old boy, bluish complexion, glowing, beautiful. He emerged from his mother and walked out of the hut. Vedavyasji is thinking, now what? First, he didn't come out for 12 years. Now, as soon as he comes out, he's walking off into the jungle without saying a word to anybody. Yam pravrajantamanupetamapeta krityam dvaipayano virahakatar ajuhav putreti tanmayataya tarvo bhine dustam sarvabhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. The Bhagavatam tells this part of the story that Shukdev is going off into the woods, into the jungle, and Vedavyasji, his father, is following behind, calling, "Oh, my son, where are you going? Come back." And Shukdev ji is totally absorbed. His mind was absorbed in formless God. See, formless God is everywhere, including permeating us. So when Shukdev ji looked around, all he saw was himself everywhere. All he heard was himself. All he smelled was himself. All he thought was himself. He was totally absorbed in formless God. So he paid no heed. Never mind paying heed. First you have to hear someone's calling you, right? Before you're going to say, "Oh, what? What can I do for you?" The words never even penetrated into him, even though his father was nearby. And he kept walking. He passed by a pond where there were some apsaras bathing. Apsaras are celestial maidens from Swarg. Shukdev ji just passed by and kept going. Now Vedavyasji, who's quite elderly, he has long hair, gray hair matted on his head, long gray beard. He is also following behind his son, and when those apsaras saw Vedavyasji, although they had paid no notice to Shukdev, when Vedavyasji came by, they all covered themselves out of modesty. Drishtva nuyantam rishimatmajamapyanagnam devyo hriyan paridadhur nasutasya chitram tadvikshya prichhati munau jagadustavastis tripumbhida natu sutasya vivikta drishte. Vedavyasji, seeing this, he stopped and questioned them that my son, who is practically a teenage boy, just walked by you and you didn't have any sense of modesty in front of him, and you're behaving so modestly in front of me. Why the difference? So they replied that you could see in his eyes that for him there was no difference between a tree and a rock and a woman and a cloud, and everything was the same, as all Brahm for him. There was no difference in his drishti and what he was seeing. But Vedavyasji, you were noticing that's a tree, that's a rock, that's a woman. So seeing that, we became modest. So Shukdev ji was in that state, totally absorbed. Eventually, Vedavyasji couldn't go any further ahead. Shukdev went on into the jungle, and when it got too thick even for him to walk, he sat down in Brahmaleen state. Leen means your mind is totally absorbed. So it was in that state that two of the young boys who were disciples in Vedavyasji's ashram, they found Shukdev ji like this some time later. They were out gathering firewood in the jungle, and they found Shukadevji, and they were so curious seeing this beautiful glowing boy who was sitting in samadhi in the jungle. And they tried calling to him, they even tried shaking him. There was no reaction. So they went back and told Vedavyasji, and Vedavyasji said, I know who that is. That's my son, Shukadev. And now my problem is solved, because he is the one who's qualified to hear the Bhagavatam. But there's still one little glitch. He's absorbed in Brahmalin Samadhi. He's not hearing any word. No one can arouse him. So how am I going to teach him Bhagavatam? He's not hearing anything. So let me do this. He wrote down one shlok of Bhagavat. And he gave it to those two boys. And he said, go and sing this near Shukadevji. They said, sing what? He can't hear anything. We were just screaming in his ears. There was no reaction. He said, no, just go and do it. You'll see. So they went and they sang this shlok in front of Shukadevji. Shukadevji's eyes fluttered open briefly. How? Is one shlok of Bhagavat? Yes. In that shlok, remember, the bliss of Shri Krishna is imbued. So it was a description describing Shri Krishna walking with the cows and gwalbals through the beautiful, lush, green, rolling hills, entering into Vrindavan. And it describes how is he dressed, how are his eyes, how is his smile. Like the Roop Dhyan we were doing, that type of thing. Except Shukadevji is already a divine personality. He's already attained formless God. So his level of Roop Dhyan and our level is very different. When he heard that shlok, he actually saw Shri Krishna for real. It wasn't just a description for him. He saw the whole thing happening, and Shri Krishna looked right at him. So he opened his eyes in excitement, but then he again closed them. Why? Because he thought, he's so beautiful. He had a desire in his heart. I want to meet him. But he thought, he's so beautiful. Why would he come to me? No. He just closed his eyes, went back into his samadhi, absorbed in bliss of formless God. The boys came back and reported to Vedavyasji what happened. Vedavyasji wrote down another shlok from Bhagavat. The boys went and sang this one. Aho vakiyam stankalkutam jighansaya payayadapya sadhvi lebhe gatim dhatriuchitam tatonyam kam va dayalum sharanam vrajema. This shlok is describing his kindness, how he goes out of his way to grace somebody. He's looking for any reason to go to a soul. Specifically, it's talking about Putana. Putana had come when Shri Krishna was only 6 days old with the intention of killing him. And her plan was that she smeared Kalkut Vish, the most deadly poison, on her breast and then suckled Shri Krishna. And Shri Krishna drank the milk. But instead of him dying, Putana died. But he said, she came to me as a mother, so I have to give her my divine abode. He sent her to Golok abode. Imagine a demoness, a Rakshasi, who came to him with the intention of killing him. He found some excuse. He said, she came to me as a mother, let me grace her with my divine abode. So when he's so dayalu, so kind, so merciful, that he would grace Putana, why wouldn't he grace us? We are his children. So that one virtue of kindness, daya, that entered into Shukdev ji's heart. One guna of Shri Krishna. This time his eyes opened for good, and he asked those boys, what was that? I want to hear more. He said, your father Vedavyasji has written 18,000 shloks like this. It's called Srimad Bhagavat Mahapuran. And he wants you to learn it. So please follow us back to his ashram. So Shukdev ji went and listened to the whole Bhagavatam from his father. What does this story illustrate is that within the divine phenomenon, there's different levels of blissfulness, although all of them are infinite. The bliss of formless God is infinite. Yet, the bliss of Shri Krishna, the bliss of the personal form of God, there's something more. Think of it like this. You have sugar cane growing out here. You can go out in the field and cut it and chew on a little bit of cane. It's sweet, right? But if you refine it, it becomes sweeter. You make jaggery out of it, gura. Further refine that into chini, white sugar. Further refine that into those little hard cubes we call mishri. It keeps getting sweeter and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, more and more concentrated. So a little bit of mishri is equal to that much cane. Something like that. The bliss of formless God, even though it's also infinite, but it's somehow further intensified and enriched in the leelas and the virtues of the personal form of God. So just like if you have a cup of water and it's totally full to the brim, you can't put more water in, but you can put honey in there because the honey is heavier. It will displace the water. So the bliss of Shri Krishna's beauty and the bliss of his kindness was able to penetrate that state of samadhi of Shukdev ji where no material word could penetrate, no material sound could penetrate. And yet that shlok, which was imbued with the bliss of Shri Krishna's beauty and kindness, those were able to penetrate his samadhi, and he became totally aware. Now he's seeing and hearing, and he has a desire to hear more. Now he's forgotten about his bliss of formless God, and he just wants to submerge himself in the bliss of Shri Krishna's virtues and leelas. Atma Ramascha Munayo Nirgrantha Apyurukrame Kurvantyahaitu Kim Bhakti Mitham Bhuta Guno Hari. The Bhagavatam tells that so great is the bliss in this Bhagavat that even great Paramahansas like Shukdev ji, who were totally free from desire, free from attachment, free from anger, free from ignorance, and totally absorbed in their own divine state, they abandoned that with a desire, a new desire, a divine desire, to taste the ras of Shri Krishna's leelas and his virtues. So I told you this event so that you could understand something about the greatness of the Bhagavatam. The truth is that what we're doing here today and in the next couple of days, we can get some benefit from this. From me talking about the Bhagavatam based on what I heard from Jagadguru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj. And you can get some benefit of listening to the Bhagavatam. But you see, just like at the end of the Gita, what happened? Arjun was God realized. He saw Shri Krishna in his divine form. At the end of the Bhagavatam, what happened? Parikshit went to the divine world. He had attained Shri Krishna. Will that happen to us? No. We're not qualified in that same way. I am not Shukadevji Paramahans. I'm not of that caliber of bhakta. And you yourselves can judge whether you're at the level of King Parikshit in terms of being Shrota. So we're not going to actually understand what the Bhagavatam is. It's impossible. We would have to be at that level like Shukadevji. But it doesn't mean we can't get some benefit from hearing about the Bhagavatam. If we just listen with an open heart, with a desire to receive Shri Krishna's grace, and to whatever extent our mind is open to feel a little bit of the bliss that's imbued in the Bhagavatam, then we are getting something. That's part of the process. It's part of the process of bhakti. Bhakti, the actual reason for doing bhakti is to purify the heart. So in the 11th canto, when he's explaining about bhakti to Uddhav, Shri Krishna says, Yatha yathatma parimrijyate sau mat punyagatha shravanabhidhanai tatha tatha pashyati vastu sukshmam chakshuryathaijan jana samprayuktam. He says that listening to my leelas, if you really are doing smaran, meaning you're hearing the leela and it's entering your heart and you're allowing that leela to be in your heart, then what happens is your heart is gradually purified. Like when, let's say you have a temporary blindness and you put some Ayurvedic ointment on your eyes that is going to cure that blindness. What happens is gradually, see, initially it's all dark for you. Then as you start to be healed, you just see, oh, I can make out some light, but you can't see anything still. Then you make out some shadowy forms, but everything is fuzzy and black and white. As your eye gets cured more, you start to make out forms and colors, and eventually your sight becomes crystal clear. Shri Krishna says, just like that, I am right here with you, but you can't see. It's like there's a veil between you and me. That veil is the impurity of your own heart. Remove that and I'm right here. How do you remove that? My leelas are the great purifier. Listen to my leelas, meditate on my leelas, bring them in your heart gets cleaned out, and gradually, just like you gradually regain your eyesight, gradually the fact that I'm right here with you starts to become apparent to you. You start to feel, Shri Krishna is right here with me. When you do Rup Dhyan, it's not feeling like just your imagination anymore. You're feeling and seeing Shri Krishna right here with you. And that goes on intensifying more and more and more until the day our heart is 100% pure, we're 100% surrendered to Shri Krishna, then real Shri Krishna is there, right in front of us. We meet him face to face. That's God realization, Bhagavat Prapti. That's the ultimate goal of a soul, to meet Shri Krishna face to face. Your divine beloved to whom you are eternally related, but you've been forever separated from. Not because he's far, but because our heart is impure. We're not surrendered to him, so we're unable to experience him. We're unable to realize his absolute closeness with us. So that's the ultimate goal of our soul. Aside from all of the physical duties and responsibilities we have in our life that are related to our body, our deeper goal that's related to our soul is to meet Shri Krishna face to face. And the process of reaching that point is called bhakti. And the material that we need, he's already given to us in the form of Bhagavatam. Take those leelas, hear those leelas, listen to them, meditate on them. You'll clean your heart and you're getting closer to that state of God realization. So this is what Bhagavatam is for us. It has important philosophy to understand, and it also has the leelas of Shri Krishna, which will purify our heart if we listen to them faithfully. So this is a brief introduction to the Bhagavatam. This same series I've given in a little bit longer previously, so there are some videos available on YouTube. So if you want to hear a little bit longer introduction, I've given I think 7 one-hour speeches just introducing what is Bhagavatam, which is available on YouTube. I can give you a card afterwards if anyone wants that has the actual website where these videos are embedded. This gives you, I hope, a good idea of what is the Bhagavatam, what's its importance, what can be gained by listening to the Bhagavatam. Tomorrow we'll be having satsang, not here, but somewhere nearby, I think, right? How far is it from here? 45 minutes. I didn't know Trinidad was that big. Okay, so it's not that close, but you're still invited. You can talk to Indira, and I'll be continuing on Bhagavatam tomorrow, and we'll be back here again at the same time on Monday. What I'd like to finish with, however, tonight is, since you've got some appreciation for the greatness of the Leelas of the Bhagavatam now, I'll tell you one brief Leela about Shri Krishna in the Bhagavatam, and we'll finish with a little bit of Kirtan, and then we'll have the Arti. If you'd like, you can close your eyes and you can visualize this Leela. Just like he was saying, the Leela has to enter your heart. So try to do like Shukadev ji. When you hear it, try to visualize the whole thing. Shri Krishna lived in Vrindavan, Gokul, Nandagaon, all these beautiful villages of Braj. And when he was old enough, his family's Purohit, Gargacharya, he came and advised Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba that now your son, Shri Krishna, he's old enough to go out and graze the calves. Not the full-grown cows, but the babies, the calves. He was only 5 years old, which is quite young, but there were older boys in the neighborhood, so they would take care of Shri Krishna. It was the auspicious time for him to go out and begin grazing the cows. So every day, Shri Krishna used to go out grazing, and there was a particular style. Even today in Braj, those who graze the cows, they do it barefoot for one. Vedas tell that when you're grazing the cows, you should be barefoot. And even today, all the local kids who go out and graze the cows, they do it together. So however many cows you have, you go out with your lunch because you're going out for the whole day. You meet up with your neighbor who also has some cows, and as you keep heading out to the fields, another neighbor comes and joins in. So all the neighborhood boys would meet Shri Krishna. We call them the Gwalbals. They would all be dressed up in their village country style, beautifully decorated with some kind of headband or turban, wearing a colorful dhoti, some kind of shawl around their shoulders, a stick for herding the cows, and a little satchel with lunch that their mother had prepared for them. So each of the boys had his lunch. And you can imagine Shri Krishna, he is the very form of bliss, the very form of beauty, the very form of divine love. What is the greatness of the fortune of these boys who get to have Shri Krishna as their very own friend? And they meet with him just like you would meet with your best friend. Oh Kanha, oh Kanhaiya, here I am, let's go. I have my lunch. What did your mother pack for you today? And all the boys meet up and head out with their calves, carrying their lakuti, the stick, and their lunch satchel. And Shri Krishna poured the bliss through his loving interaction with these boys, with his friends. So instead of behaving as serious supreme God, he left aside his godliness in order to be friends with these boys. And these boys are also saints, but they are not consciously thinking about the fact that Shri Krishna is God. They want him as their friend. So they just love him as a friend, and they don't even mind about the fact that he's God. So as they're walking, they're telling jokes together. They stop and find some colorful clays, and they decorate each other's cheeks and arms and chest by smearing on some different lines of colored clay. Some boy finds some colorful feathers, so they decorate their turbans and their hair with some feathers. Someone else finds some beautiful flowers, so they add some flowers to their decorations. As they're walking, one of the boys may grab the lunch satchel of someone else. And then he's trying to get it back, so he throws it to another boy. And he runs over to him, so he throws it to another boy, and everybody's laughing, and they finally give it back to him. Sometimes Shri Krishna goes on ahead, and all the boys run to see who could touch him first. And they all come in a big scram around Shri Krishna. They head out and they reach their destination place where the calves can happily graze on some lush green grass. And now it's time to enjoy, because all the boys don't have to be watching the calves all the time. One or two boys can look after everybody's calves, so they take turns. And the rest of the boys play with Shri Krishna. So he may be playing a tune on his flute, and as he's playing, a couple of the boys are dancing. Then some wrestling starts up. Even Shri Krishna gets in the act and wrestles with those boys. Afterwards, they have some rest in the shade of a big, beautiful tree. Shri Krishna putting his head in the lap of Balaram, and the other boys feeling happy to press his legs as Shri Krishna rests and takes a little nap. When they wake up, when Shri Krishna wakes up, They have some lunch together. All the boys sit around Shri Krishna with him in the middle. And they all unwrap their lunch satchel and excitedly start sharing, "Oh, Kanha, my mom gave me some samosa. Here, have a bite." And then one boy sees, "Oh, your mom gave you dahi vada. Your mom gave you some laddu, sweet balls. I want some of that." And he snatches some food from Kanhaiya. In this way, the boys are laughing and joking and sharing the food around. And they pass their time like this. Over here, one of the Gwalbals sees a peacock dancing, and so he starts mocking the peacock, calling out to him and trying to imitate his dance. Another couple boys see some monkeys up in the trees and start chasing the monkeys around in the trees. So in this way, Shri Krishna is sharing this childhood fun with these boys and gracing them with his personal friendship. And these leelas are described in the Bhagavatam so that we can also learn to love Shri Krishna as a friend, or as our own son, or as our beloved. And by meditating on these simple, sweet childhood leelas, we're joining our mind with the divinity. We're doing smaran, which is the heart and soul of devotion. At the end, in the late afternoon, Shri Krishna, with all the boys and all the calves, makes his way back, and all the boys return to their individual homes and meet their mothers. Shri Krishna's mother Yashoda has been waiting for him. She happily bathes him and dresses him and feeds him. And in this way, every day, Shri Krishna is giving the bliss of his divine friendship to his friends. To his mother, he's giving Vatsalya Prem, the love that a mother has for a child and a child has for a mother. Many different types of Prem Shri Krishna revealed in his dissension here, and all of that is described in the Bhagavatam for our own devotional use. So now we'll finish with a little bit of kirtan. You can keep doing Roop Dhyan of Shri Krishna. Think of any other Leela of his that you know, or make up a new Leela of your own liking. As long as you're thinking of him, your mind will continue to be purified. Radhe Radhe Govinda Bhajo, Radhe Radhe Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda.
राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भज राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भज राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भजो 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 राधे राधे गोविंदा
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 राधे राधे गोविंदा भज राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भजो 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 राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भजो राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भजो राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भज राधे राधे गोविंदा
राधे राधे गोविंदा भजो राधे राधे गोविंदा
बोलो लाडली लाल की. We can all stand for the arti. जयति जगद गुरु गुरुवर की गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की गुरु पद नख मणि चंद्रिका प्रकाश जाके उर बसे ताके मोह तमनाश जाके माथ नाथ तव हाथ करवास पाते होय माया मोह सब ही निराश पावे गति बती हरे मन मूढ़ छानु नारी नरहार, गुरु बिनु ब्रह्म श्याम न देंगे सार। कोमल कृपालु बड़े कृपा सिंधु नाथ, पाके में आज तू अनाथ हो सनाथ। इन्हीं के आधीन कृपा गिरिधर की, गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। भक्ति योग रस अवतार अभिराम, करे निगमागम समन्वय नलाम। श्यामा श्याम नाम रूप लीला गुण धाम, बात रहे प्रेम निष्काम बिनु दाम। हो रही सफल काया नारी नर की, गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। लली लाल लीला का सलोना सुविलास, छाया दिव्य दृष्टि बिच प्रेम का प्रकाश। वैसा ही विनोद वही मंजु मृदुहास, करे बस बर बस उच्च अट्टहास। झूमे चले चाल वही नट वर की, गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। जयति जगत गुरु गुरुवर की, गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। गाओ गाओ मिली आरती रसिक वर की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की बनवारी नतवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की बनवारी नतवारी की। दुमुन सिर कनक मुकुट झलकै, दुमुन श्रुति कुंडल भल हलकै। दुमुन दृग प्रेम सुधा छलकै, रसीले बैन रसीले नैन गसीले सैन। दुमुन मैनन मन हारी की बनवारी नतवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की बनवारी नतवारी। दुमुनि दृग चितवनि परवारी, दुमुनि लट लट कनि छवि न्यारी। दुमुनि भामट कनि अति प्यारी, रसन मुख पान रसन मुस्कान। रसन रमकान दुमुन बेसर छवि न्यारी की बनवारी नतवारी की। आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की सिर चूनरी छवि छाजय धून सिर तीर छे भल प्राजय चांद ब्रज बाल नारली लाल बाह गलदाल कृपालु धून मृग चारी की बनवारी नटवारी आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की बनवारी नटवारी आरती प्रीतम प्यारी की बनवारी नटवारी। बोलो वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की, सियावर रामचंद्र की, जगत गुरु श्री कृपालु जी महाराज की जय जय श्री राधे जय जय श्री राधे जय जय श्री राधे।